Okay. Well, good morning, Greg. We're fired away. We're recording here very early morning. I'm already on my second cup of coffee, and it's only 5 a.m. My time. So we've finally coming in for a landing on the month of October, which has been insane. So that's a good thing. But
I agree.
we'll see how this conversation goes today.
So
But
both of us have come up with a new term, and that's "we'll sleep when we're in prison,"
yeah.
because we've been doing travel back to back to back in so many different locations of this wonderful country that we have no idea what a rental car looks like when we got home.
Yeah.
I mean, I
I
know personally I haven't slept since Sunday.
I like when I walk out of the hotel and you're standing at the wrong rental car, and then I walk over
Exactly.
and I hit the button. I'm like, Greg, it's over here, and I'm standing at the other wrong rental car, and like,
Exactly.
wait a minute, where are we at?
Exactly.
But
We knew it
anyway,
was great.
yeah. So, but today, we want to talk about something we get questions about a lot. We've discussed
Yeah,
on other episodes before, and that has to do with like personality tests, trait theory in general, because we don't get into that. We had one person on the show a while back. Remember Alana? She came on to talk about
I do.
very specific stuff where she was helping women who were in like sort of abusive type relationships get out, get divorced, and like how to deal with people. And like I kind of got it where she was getting at was like, okay, if this person exhibits these traits, here's methods to communicate with them more
Yes,
effectively or get or set boundaries better. Like, so I was like, okay, I like that because it's a practical approach. But in general, with trait theory, anyone who's experts in this and studies trait theory, which there's the 5 factor psychology model, which is has the most data behind it, but anyone who really does that stuff will tell you that it's not a good predictor of behavior at all. It's just a way to articulate, a set of experiences and feelings and emotions and behaviors sometimes, right? That's what psychology
exactly.
is, affect, cognition, and behavior, right? What you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're doing. But people get kind of obsessed with this stuff because, there's all this psychopathy and sociopathy that people talk about, and there's what's even worse is a lot of personality tests, and they've entered the workforce in mass. I mean, this is something that's just everyone does now. And I know you had sent me an article,
Yep.
and there's just a great quote from it. And this guy was writing about personality tests specifically in the workplace, and his name is Professor Kevin Murphy of the University of Limerick. And he said personality tests are simple to use, provide definitive answers, and are largely worthless for making important decisions, which i
Right.
could i could not support that comment anymore.
And he
um
went on record saying it as
and
a tenured professor, which is wonderful. I
and
love that.
and I kind of just want to preface a few things we'll talk about, but and then I'll throw to you because we'll talk about this in general, about personality tests, kind of what our opinion is.
Yeah.
I have similar ones. You talk a little bit about the Lord of the Flies. We'll talk a little bit about measurement and
Cool.
assessment, and that in general, how a measurement tool is only good as the person using it. Not everything that we measure matters. Not everything that matters is what we measure, and a
Amen.
few different other things. But I'll throw to you to get started, Greg, because I know you have kind of some strong opinions on it as well, mostly on kind of the lack of utility of any of this stuff. But
Yeah.
I'll let you start.
So I'll just fire a couple of shots across the bow that can kind of give us a fundamental underpinning to the longer argument. And to Murphy's incredible quote, I would add a personality test can only tell you what you tell it. And therefore, your answers to questions on humility and honesty and agreeableness, right?
Hmm.
Okay, seriously, you're answering your question based on your assessment of you.
Yeah.
So humans are complex psychological entities, and they have multiple dimensions. And just the concept of these tests is dumbing that down to traits for comparison from one human to the same human in the same situation. So you talk about a Maslow on steroids. You talk about looking down and in and never comparing it against up and out in the rest of society. And what I mean by that is that the true definition of personality, the combination of characteristics or qualities that form an individual's distinctive character. Personality is your collection of interrelated behavioral, cognitive, and emotional patterns, and that biological and environmental factors influence it. And we also know that those interrelated patterns and are relatively stable over time, over longer periods of time, but they do change over your lifetime. Why?
And
Because you influence or are
yes.
influenced by other things. So Brian, personality can be simply a projection of you
Hmm.
that you provide to the outside world, but
And
it
that
by no means is an accurate portrayal of you.
no, and because it's just like anything, it's very context dependent, and
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
portray a different person based on your environment, based on what the
And that's
situation
what
is.
we measure. That's
Right.
the beauty of it
Well,
is we measure your reaction to external stimuli in a very specific laser focused way,
yeah.
and so
Well, and
therefore we can predict.
yeah, and well, I'd say before we get to any of that, I was just saying,
Yeah.
like, I mean, very simply, like, I act and behave and talk very differently when I'm hanging out with my brother than I do with my mom. You know what I mean?
My
And
point exactly. And from
so
the beginning of the day
the work
to the
day
end of
it
the day,
was,
right?
so what the
On
event is.
vacation,
Yeah,
Brian.
and
Come
so
on.
when it comes to this way, and people are just a lot of times are just trying to be introspective and want some meaning or understanding of who they are, what they are, and that's great,
Yep.
like in terms of finding out what your likes and dislikes are, and how you learn, or how things affect you, that's cool. But it's just to the first point of what you said, if it's like going to a gym or a trainer and being like, yeah, this is how much I weigh and this is how much I can lift. They're like, yeah, no, step the fuck on the scale
Wait a
and then
minute.
go load the
Yeah.
bar up.
Yeah.
Like, no, you
That's so
don't get to
cool.
say, oh yeah, I think I can bench this much. I mean, no, like that's
Yep.
that's like, you have to show what you can do. And so there's a couple reasons for that. So if I'm assessing myself, one, there's going to be things that I think I'm better at than I really am. But
Yes.
the opposite of that is true too, meaning like there's things that people will be hard on themselves about, or overly critical, even though that might not necessarily be true. So you're not getting a true kind of reading yourself. And these tests in general are so unreliable.
Yep.
Like, if I take one when I'm feeling great, having a great day, and well rested, and I take one of those, I'll land in some category. And then, 2 days later, I haven't slept much, I'm hungover, I'm whatever, like, you're
Yep.
going to land in a completely different category. And so that's a completely unreliable assessment. And just with any assessment tool, I don't care what it is, it's only as good as the person who's using it, right? So if I can't hold a tape measure straight, I'm not getting an accurate, reading of
Precisely.
I'm not getting an accurate measurement of the distance. But that doesn't mean that the tape measure is wrong. It means, I'm
Right.
using it incorrectly.
But I think to caveat that specific point, Brian, that's such a great
Hmm.
analogy. How much will go wrong with your home remodeling project? Okay.
Exactly.
That wall's out of square, then you're going to have to pay more, and then it's not going to drain properly, and the water damage in 2 years is going to be extensive. So the idea of relying heavily on these is based on a faulty set of paradigms to create a predictive analysis. And what I mean by that is we do prognostics and diagnostics. We take a look at the event, the vehicle, the person, then we place them against the background, which is the context and relevance, and we place that against the baseline. And then we make a determination on what most likely or most dangerous course of action would be. Then we watch for a bit with a explanatory storyline in mind based on those hypotheses and see whether the hypothesis comes true or not. What I mean is that those observed characteristics are very important. So then somebody goes, well, why did you just say they're not on personality? Because personality is a name that we gave, like you know this with Max. With Max, you call it his temperament.
Yeah.
What's Max temperament like in the morning?
Oh yeah,
He's full of
he's
energy,
so
right?
happy. Yeah.
He's got a great emotional response to everything that you do. Okay, so that plus whatever he learns from you and then from his hamper and from his doll and everything
Yeah.
else are going to create his personality, right? But that personality is going to change when mom's home. That personality
You
is going
can
to change
literally
when
see
your daughter's
you
there.
can literally see the difference between how he interacts with the three of
So,
us.
so then don't tell me that a Myers Briggs or some other
Yeah.
test is going to take that and inform us on how I'm going to do in the future. And I have a theory on this, Brian, and I've always had the same theory is that we named it personality testing because we want people to sit in school with their
Yeah.
shoulders back straight
Yeah.
up. We want the people that come to
Yes.
work to
That,
act in a specific way in a business setting. And therefore, we say we value these 9 traits. It's the big 5 now, but you get what I mean. We
yeah.
value these 9 traits, and we're going to test you for them. Hey, when Shelly did her first test, that I think it was ninth grade, no, it must have been 6th grade, it said you'll be a forest ranger or work in
Yeah.
the food service industry or something.
Yeah.
What are you going to live that now?
Well,
Are you going to
that's the
come on?
thing, and you're going backwards. Then it's like
Yep.
this is why I can't stand those things, because they're trying to put someone in a box, and then people will put themselves in
Yes.
a box and be like, okay, I'm an INFTJ. I don't know what any of them, like, I don't care, but I'm this, and like that's who they think they are, and you're like, like that's not, that's so overly
Yep.
simplistic, and what value does it have for you? Because some of
Yep.
these, like, and that's why only why I kind of brought up the big five as a difference, because what they do on that, there's been so many just research and studies into it that they have a comparative baseline for society in general, to where like,
Yes.
so for like differences between age groups or men and women or something like that.
Yeah,
So
but
that's the
exactly.
comparison. It doesn't mean you are
That's why
this
it's more
person.
accurate, right?
Well, it's,
Because
yeah,
those numbers are meaningful, right?
yes,
Those, like if you say, well, I'll give you a example, a couple of the say, if you're conscientious, then based on your other pursuits, then you're probably going to be more proficient at your job. What kind of horseshit is that? Okay, if I'm conscientious at chasing skirt, for example, if I would like skirt, then does that mean that I'm going to be more punctual coming to work? Then they say creative people are more open to new experience. Okay, I got that. But the caveat to that is they're also less conventional and much more self-confident. So if you're a
yes,
boss and you're reading that result, you want a creative person? No. You want to toe the line, follow the leader person, right? And then folks with higher anxiety levels or depressed or have, let's say, substance abuse disorders, they're higher on neuroticism and lower on conscientious. So are you going to be less punctual because of those things? And am I going to decline
well,
offering you?
this,
You get where
the
I'm going?
well,
What are we using
that's
it for?
well, that's the whole point, is what are you using for? So there's certain advantages, some of the stuff, if let's say
Right.
I'm going to see a therapist or some personal development, and they can assess me in different contextual situations as well,
Precisely.
right? A lot of different, like, you know, situational judgment test or something like that, or going through something and taking a bunch, and then them as a professional and go, all right, like here's kind of how you fall in. Oh, you want to
Yes.
work on some things, like you keep getting passed over promotion, you have a hard time because you're too agreeable or something. Well, this is why. You know what I mean? But
Exactly.
that's to
So
work with
now
you.
you can, that's
You
profound because now you
yeah,
could use that information.
exactly. But for the hiring stuff, it's
No.
that's the worst thing I've ever heard.
And
Like, it,
HR is not a professional that should be doing that. Look, if a mental health professional comes to you or a psychologist, Brian, and they do a series of tests on you, a psychiatrist even, and that's stretching it,
yeah,
and they say, okay, you've come up with the dark triad, right?
yeah,
So you're a narcissist, a Machiavellian,
yeah,
and you have psychopathic or
psychopathic, yeah,
a deep
traits, yeah,
psychopathy trait,
yeah,
right? So now, if you have all three of those during the testing, they can predict likely aggression and delinquency and interpersonal and sex differences and antisocial differences that a person next to you won't have. But Brian, that's on how long of research? That goes
yeah.
back how long when people were testing it? And still, even now, we're poking holes in some of that and saying, well,
Well,
maybe not
yeah,
as strong a predictor of whatever. So if you're telling me that we can go back to every person that I venerate, before Freud, all the way back to the Aegean,
yeah.
and we look at that, and then you're going to say, yeah, but we've come up with a foolproof way of filling in these little black dots, and when they come back out of the computer, we can tell you who you are. Brian, it's harder than that. It really is, and I know I don't want to oversimplify it, but every expert says that you should be skeptical and that these aren't worth the money. And I'm
Yeah.
chiming in on the experts, but I'm also a scientist. So if there comes a time when I see deliberate evidence that is conclusive that says that I can use it for prediction qualities, Brian, I would love to use it. But I think it's being used wrong, and I think that fundamental attribution error and our biases are forcing those results to be true.
Well, yeah.
We're saying, hey, good hire on Tim, right? Because
Right,
he is
right.
right.
And
He filled in all those blanks, didn't he?
and
Right? Come
and
on.
and and these are all one, they're only descriptive in nature, and
Yeah.
they're not that reliable. And so
Right.
why, what value does it have then? Like, that's my thing, is
Yep.
why would you put so much value on an oversimplified assessment that,
But you know why? Okay,
because they can
because
point to something and say this is why, versus, well, I got a
there it is.
good feeling for the guy, you know what I mean? And
Anytime I can point to something, a certificate,
yeah,
a vehicle, a steel door at the school, look at that thing that I brought that makes this somehow better than something else. And the idea is a door is only as good as, keeping it locked. And what have we seen human nature as, Brian?
Right.
Prop that gosh damn door open. So, you're telling me that the results of this test may differentiate me from somebody else, and that differentiation may exclude me from getting hired now when I need a job more than ever. And I sit down to this long test and I'm going through every question that seemingly makes no sense to me, but it's going to make sense to somebody else. And I'm trying to give it my best foot forward. See, the difference between a blood test is no matter how hard I study, the results are going to be the same. Do you get
Yeah.
it? I mean, so that's a true diagnostic. My
Right.
piss test, okay,
Yeah.
unless I come to subterfuge, it's going to really tell what it's going to tell.
Yeah.
And that's not good for our company, but it's,
Well,
it's going to be real,
we have a very, very, very strict no drug testing policy at our
we
organization. So
we want to
we
medicate,
will never.
self-medicate early and often to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward,
Yeah, well, and we
if that's my foot.
want you to deal with your problems because I don't want to deal with them. No, but
We can't, we
but
can't.
and this kind of gets into a lot of different sort of diagnostic tools
Yep,
like that, or where someone comes up with a way to explain something because they have some data that
yep,
may correlate, and then part of it is it takes off for a while. And then
yep.
people go, oh, wait, this is kind of not really. I mean, that's like your buddy Maslow that you love bashing. It's like that was all popular. And then
I'm
now
not
you go to
bashing his whole
now
body of work, just,
no, well, yeah, I
his
mean,
fraud part.
this hierarchy of needs, which isn't even taught at a lot of places anymore.
Okay,
I
so
mean,
you,
you really
Brian, keep your train of thought, because I just want to liken it to this gosh damn, hey, date better by doing our app. Yeah, you got
exactly,
it. You
yeah.
got it made, Maslow. I mean, dating app.
Yeah. That those are all they're kind of junk and they're just
Yep,
completely unreliable and
yep,
everyone's throwing together saying, "Well, look, what about this? What about that?" And it's like, "No, you're using ends justification
exactly.
to prove what you think it was when it may have had absolutely nothing to do with that." But where I was going with this too is
Yeah,
we like to categorize those into different areas and we have this kind of odd view of psychology sometimes because it's a nebulous, complex science and
yep.
it's new. I mean, psychology is not. It's not like it hasn't been around as long as math and
And it's
physics. You know what I
changing.
mean?
And it's
So
changing. Right, right.
there's and just now as we have access to data and can really data mine that stuff with AI and machine learning stuff, we're actually figuring out, oh wow, some of this stuff really doesn't matter at all, does it?
Yep.
But this is one of those things, and the reason why I brought up Lord of the Flies at the beginning is because
Great, great, great
it's a great book. It's a
connection.
great story. Everyone's read it when they were a kid in
Yep,
school. But in those, you have these sort of different characters, right? These different
yep,
personalities that were molded to tell the story, right? And everyone uses this reference, which is hilarious because of the Lord of the Flies reference. Oh, it turns into Lord of the Flies down there. Well, that's actually not what really happens in real life at all. I mean,
right.
when we don't turn into the savage beast,
Nope.
running around the island. Because it was so funny because after that book was published, I think it was just a few years after, there was like a bunch of British kids. There were like eight or 10 of them got shipwrecked on an island somewhere, and guess what? They survived for I think six
Yeah,
months
but
or something.
no, flip it. That's what Golding based his book on. The
I think
idea is that it
yeah,
actually occurred, and the timeline doesn't matter, but the idea is that the book was written to create the dramatic effects of society's downfall. Piggy with the conch shell and
yeah.
making the decision, and that does not happen. And it's been proven not to happen.
No, I know, and that's why I bring that story up because you have a lot of this in there, and there's
Yeah.
literally a lot of characters in stories that use sort of different personality traits from stuff like this to talk about it, and then these stories are also then used in some of
Yep.
the not justification, but to explain some of the personality traits, and it's junk. I mean, meaning it's not real. It's not humans are. It doesn't show the complexity of someone's personality and what that really means. I mean,
Yep.
humans are a little bit more complex than that, and anytime you try to put it in just a little square box like that, it's not gonna make sense all the time.
So
And
you're spot on, Brian. Broken humans act broken. Hurt humans hurt.
right,
Okay, why can we make those predictions, and why are those predictions followed up? And you know what predictions we don't make is that kid's going to be a school shooter based on some test that we give in third grade.
right,
Okay, so the idea is that we don't create. We're not alchemy. We're not sitting there saying that if you put certain things together and say Wingardium
yeah,
Leviosa, other things will happen. What we're doing is we're saying certain indicators, like uh, uh, your friend that wrote an incredible review, the gentleman from Flint that works in this all the
Hmm.
time. What a great review. Now he mentions perception all over and how
Yeah.
we deal in perception, but we also deal in emotion. Why do we deal in emotion? Because emotion is hardwired.
Yes.
Okay. You're emotionally who you are. And so your method of communication, your means of wordless language through chemistry and mind, it's basically a definition of emotion, right? Because it's coming out of all your pores to another human. Why? Because that's my most primitive way of communicating to you
Hmm.
that I'm sad or I need help or something is wrong in my environment. And then fear is an emotion that does what? It makes us recoil so that that snake doesn't snap at us and bite us, right? So we add to that the perceptions of human behavior, and it's situational. So we can't predict what you're going to do tomorrow afternoon at 2, okay?
Yeah.
Unless we've clocked you every afternoon at 2 and you go to Winchell's for a coffee and a cruller, okay? Then we can make a reasonable assumption that that's what you're going to do. So HR is not using these tools for that. HR is using this as a discriminatory, and I mean that in its
Yeah.
clinical definition,
Yeah.
way of filling you into a slot that's available in a job. And so the proof isn't in the pudding. The proof is that nobody came in and shot up the job and they go, so it works. Well, wait a minute. You know what I'm saying? Are we
Yeah.
misattributing the results? I'm not saying that exactly right, but do you get
No,
where I'm
no,
trying
no.
to go with that?
Because, well, it goes into this. Like you brought up you know, school shooter example,
Yeah.
and you could say, well, every school shooter has fallen into these categories or had these similar traits or
Yes.
these similar things. Okay. But let's say that's something that occurs where they found three distinct
Yep.
traits or something in each and every one. That doesn't mean you can go test for those traits, and just because someone has those three traits means they're any more likely
You got it.
to be a school shooter than anyone else.
You're
You
exactly
can't
right.
make that. You can't go back and do that. That's not how that works. One, that's just a misunderstanding of how data collection and statistics and probability work. But it's also just a misattribution of the meaning of what this is. It's a descriptive analytic. It's a descriptive way to describe something about you when you took the test,
You're
when you
exactly
were
right.
evaluated.
So they still haven't caught the shooter in Maine yet, as we're
As we're
talking
recording
about
this,
the
yeah,
recording, and that'll change, subject to change. The idea is they're already hypothesizing. First of all, they're already finding stress fractures. They're saying these things that he said and these things that he did, people were talking about it long before it occurred. Now, what they're going to say is, well, there's a significance between this and that, and these connections occurred. Brian, that's dangerous when we say that. Sometimes people have just had enough.
yeah,
Sometimes the bowling alley is close enough to the liquor store where I had the
yeah.
issue that that's the next place that I walk. So surmising and hypothesizing all about this is not helping us catch him.
No,
It's
it's
not
not.
reducing anxiety. Yeah. Okay. And
And
it's not a
it's not
predictive
help
analysis
when
tool.
it's not helping us understand the situation. That's the
No,
problem with it.
exactly.
It
So
muddies the
again,
waters.
it really does, because what do we always talk about when we're talking about noise, and we're talking about the pure signal, Brian? The pure signal that's coming through is muddied because we're going to spend all of these days on conjecture and not spend a minute on the facts that we can prove that way back here we had a broken human, and the failure to deal with the broken human is more likely predict a bad outcome than it is
Mhm.
just allowing, you know what I'm saying, to society to say, hey, that person, like for example, the lone wolf distinction. Now, lone wolf distinction comes from the loner, and this person's a loner. No, they're not a loner. They had to do a whole bunch of things
Right.
out in society to prepare
You
for the thing that they're doing, and those things were seen. It's just we don't know what those things are very accurately, and we don't use the right predictive analysis
you
tools.
you can't name a single loner because
Yes,
they're off by themselves, not interacting with people. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like true,
right,
a loner is someone who just wants to live
right.
off away from people. Like that's all these people they called them the loners. Like no, they were screaming out to the world. That's what Ted
They
Kaczynski
were.
wrote a freaking manifesto and then started mailing bombs. That means
Exactly.
he's not a loner, right?
But
He
and Brian, he had to pedal his bike from his
Yeah.
shitty shack all the way into town after he used an old typewriter and mailed that manifesto to somebody. So that's remaining a loner. No, I the one comment that I sent to you from the USC Davis from Samin Vazir, where he was sizing up all the different personalities tests, and he zeroed in on Myers-Briggs, and he was talking about the false impressions that are generated by the test, and he said it's bogus stuff, and he summed it up as shockingly bad. Now look, the word shockingly should be the slap of reality you need to reassess. And who sells these tests better than anybody? The people that develop them and administrate them. And so they will show you, just like anybody else out there that's a scam artist, they'll show you all this results. Look at these results. And then the worst one is, look at who uses us. Just because a person uses you is an endorsement of the procedure. It's not an endorsement of the outcome. And I'm just real skeptical, Brian. So when you brought this up, and by the way, folks, if you know the process here, late last night after I was well asleep, and late around here is 8 p.m., when the bear comes, we all huddle for safety. Brian said, hey, what about we talk about this tomorrow? And that we both got up at, 5? You know what I'm saying? To record. So there wasn't a lot of, there was zero research and planning going into it. But both of us came in with the idea that every time we've seen it used, it was more like astrology, and pseudoscience than it was science. And so we're not seeking out opinions that agree with our opinion, because you remember a couple of years ago, we had in non-attribution, we had a person that wanted to be on the team, and they said, this is what I do. And all of it was these type of testing. Now, first of all, I love that person. And what a vivacious and smart and happy person. But the fundamental attributes of the logic were flawed. So we can't do that. You see what I'm saying? We can't throw darts at a map and say, Brian threw the better darts, so today he's the scientist. There's no logic there. There's no long-term payback. And I think that's what we look for in math and science, isn't it? Your house building analogy with the tape measure. Why use the tape measure? Because we have a long-term benefit from doing that rather than a hip pocket, hey, I feel this way today.
And I think, they paint people too big or broad of a brush, right? It's just, and I kind of, one thing I see is almost kind of analogous to this, is like, I know we've talked about before, is like when people say they have different learning styles, or I'm more of like a visual, or I'm more of the, and you're like, that's all junk. And people will say that.
That's based on my research of me.
Well, no, Greg, the thing is, they've done it. We'll take people and they said, oh, yeah, I found out I'm more of this type of learner. Then they put them through different tests and found out there's zero correlation to what they say and what actually is the outcome. But we have to do that again. Sometimes, it's like, well, let's try to understand or explain the learning process. And there's a lot of science behind that, right? But between how humans learn, meaning, but to try to categorize in these different ways, it's like, no, like there's a lot going on here, and it depends on what the subject is, and it depends on 9 million other complex interactions. So why boil it down and oversimplify it, because it's not helping.
So if we've known since the late 40s and early 50s that classrooms are designed poorly, and that we want to improve the learning environment by creating different places to sit and round tables for interaction and places to get up and walk around as you're learning. So many things that are out there. They're out there. Read, do your homework. Yet every single higher education institute or academic learning institute we go into has the same old lockstep, seat forward, table at a 90. And now all those tables are wired so you can put your computer on it, so you can look down and in and sit in your little space and just veg out. That's not learning, Brian. The longer we're facing down, the less we're going to learn. And I looked up a couple of those sites back in the day when we had that person that was coming on, because I'm looking for the science. You know me, there's three things. There's science, there's con-science, which we call a conscience, and then there's non-science, right? Where do you fall in, right? And Greg's scale. And the idea is, it says that the personality development from these tests will make you more disciplined, punctual, and an asset for your organization. What? How in God's name can you say that the results of this test? Now, if you're taking a look at, again, fundamental attribution error, it can work. It can work because even the elixir sold by snake oil salesmen, right? when we're
yeah,
ramping it up. Hey, I felt better after I did
there
that,
that's a great
right?
point, because the placebo effect, in a
Of
sense,
course,
is so unbelievably powerful. It's actually the only reason why the supplement industry is as massive
billions
as it
and
is,
trillions of dollars. You're exactly right.
people, if you want to believe that this thing does this for
Yep,
you, it will give you a measurable result, and
yep.
that's across the board. That's with prescription drugs. That's with every doctor will tell you that. You know what I mean? So
Yes, even the pharmaceutical industry will
Yep.
endorse that. You're
Absolutely,
exactly
and
right.
that's why when they measure certain effects of is that for in that specific industry for different drugs, it has to, like, okay, but yeah, we had a 20% increase in this. It's like, yeah, but so did the placebo.
Yes,
So your thing did nothing, right? You have to base it to that, not just to base it to zero,
right.
right? It's just a great analogy. The way to look at it is like, well, if I believe that this thing is going to give me the accurate you know measurement of this individual, then I'm going to justify it when I'm done, because I paid for it,
Exactly.
I used it,
Exactly.
and I want it to work.
And
So
now we have the group think of all the
yeah,
people that are using it. And look, every one of those, like General Motors and
they
all these huge companies. I think of a Detroit reference, right?
yeah
Use it. Why do they use it? Because it's simple. Because they can point at it, and because nobody look. Personality is intangible, and every single human has a unique personality. So the study of personality is incompatible with psychology because there aren't norms. And so then when they come down with the 16 or 17 traits of Myers-Briggs and then the big five and all those other things, we're normalizing those. Yeah. But everybody doesn't exactly fit because I'm a 1-3-5, you're a 2-4-7,
yeah
and all those other things. So what does that mean? That means that if you have to look at a sliding scale and then that scale can be tampered with. In other words, if I had a couple of beers before lunch and the test was
hmm
taken the next morning, or I didn't have a great meal and I just want to get out of the room, Brian, that can't be science.
right,
And what I'm saying is the method can be scientific. This is like, don't get me started, but this evidence based
yeah.
training.
What
Okay,
is
so
I've never we haven't actually, you and I haven't even really talked about that term
but
and how people use that, but what the fuck does that
they're
mean?
throwing it out for
what
anything.
what
So,
is
hey,
what?
during our training, we follow the scientific method. Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
okay.
More useless, empty platitudes, right?
Yeah,
And the
that's
idea is like, you know what the difference is? And people listening now are going, what the
fuck are you
F is he
talking about?
ranting
Yeah.
on now? Okay. Do you understand that they've spent tens of millions of dollars studying the words that came out of Brian and I's mouth and all the other experts that we work together on these programs, and they vetted every single thing. They went back and they assigned tests and they did tests and they did, different situational analyses and subjective tests and determinative tests and everything else. And they come up and they said, yeah, this stuff is right. This stuff is horseshit. So why is the horseshit still out there? Look, there's a company in Gunnison. I can't say that. There are people that still believe phrenology, reading the bumps on the
Yeah,
human
reading the
head,
bumps on
are
the head.
predictive analysis, right?
Yeah.
Can I say that? I can say
Yeah.
that without getting sued or run out of
Yeah.
town. Folks, there's only 6,000 people in Gunnison and they all own pitchforks and torches. So I got to kind of play the role. You know what I mean? I don't want them to get pissed at me. But and psychology isn't the end all be all, and neither
No,
is
not at all.
psychiatry. So,
No.
so why do we latch onto those? Because they make us feel good. I go back to, God, I think it's Tommy Boy. Why do people want the what do they call it?
The
The
guarantee on
guarantee
the
on the
box.
box.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
remember that story? So, folks, if you're listening, play Tommy Boy, that
Yeah.
scene in your head, because I'm not going to stick my head up a butcher's ass.
Yeah.
But the idea is it makes us feel good. Look, every certificate you get that's not from a certificate of higher education where you had to pass final exams and go through rigorous testing
Yeah.
that's hanging on your wall is merely a certificate of attendance. And it made you feel good. And it made your agency feel good. And it makes HR feel good. That doesn't mean that you can demonstrate those skills for me right now. So be careful, right? Because if we put too much validity, Brian, in it, do you remember that at one time leeches were the way to go? Do you get what I'm trying to say? Do you
Yeah.
remember
Well,
Theodoric of York and bloodletting?
they still use leeches,
I bet they still do. Yeah, and
but I
bloodletting.
get what you're saying. It was,
Shrunken heads were a
yeah,
talisman. Come on,
yeah, yeah.
it's
Hey,
ridiculous.
seems like you've got ghosts in your blood. Have you tried cocaine? I mean, it's like
Yes, okay,
that
that
was
would sell
medicine 100
now.
years
Just
ago.
so that
Yeah.
was medicine. That was medicine in Chicago last night.
That's
You
true.
know,
No,
that's so funny.
the reason why we kind of one of the reasons too why I kind of bash these or don't put a lot of faith or value in them too. It's another thing to look at where someone's trying to explain something
Yes,
that is complex in nature and they're trying to simplify it. And when they do that, you end up oversimplifying it. And it's like
I
when
absolutely
and
agree.
it's like when, let's say when we use a photo or let's say we use a photo because I use this stuff on social media now and our Instagram account's kind of growing. So you get all these clowns in there that are just completely missing the point. But then you also
Yeah,
have amazing people who are just like really getting it.
yeah,
It's so awesome. But like when we're explaining something that you see in a photo, maybe some environmental indicators or physical indicators or something that's incongruent signals that are anomalies that we want to talk about, right? Well, our observation is basically like when we're doing that, it's like we're pressing pause on the situation, but you don't get to do that in real life. Meaning we're saying at this
no,
moment in time, at this second,
yes,
this is what this shows. Let me prove that to you. And you go, okay. But if the second you press play, that can change, right? But when
yes,
as new and incoming information comes in. So I kind of look at these, in the same way. It's like it created a snapshot for you when you
yeah,
took the exam. Now,
yeah,
which is very different than it's funny that all these businesses use this stuff. And I just heard I've heard this quote before, but there was some other business guy talking about it. And one of the things he said about people is you hire slow and you fire fast. So meaning like the only
okay,
way to know is sustained observation, right, of whether or not someone's a good fit or what they're going to be like. Like you have to take your time getting to know them, whatever. And then the second you see something out of line, you gotta cut it right there. And
right,
like it was kind of an interesting simplified way to look at it, but I thought that kind of explained what is a better approach in terms of how you observe behavior, what you're willing to accept, what you're not willing to accept, and what really matters in a sense, right? Versus
yep,
just some score on a test that you might have not been prepared for or expecting or in a great mood for that affects
yep.
how you're judged. I mean, that's what it's such an arbitrary way to gauge a person's conduct, I think. And that's my
Yeah, I
biggest
know,
problem.
and that's spot on. So the other difference to the naysayers, and there's very few of you, and you're just snipers. You just like it, your opinion out there. The idea is that the difference between us and anybody else doing what we do is press pause, explain it, then go over and prove it. Okay. We follow up on absolutely everything we do. We don't just drive by and go, hey, that was interesting, and it probably means this. I'll give you a case in a point. Brian and I had worked all day, a specific day of this week, doing our filming back in New York. And as we ended our filming day in New York, we were both exhausted and heading through the lobby of our hotel. And there's, dozens of people in the lobby of the hotel at that time of night. And I see Michael Madsen. So the idea was that I've been wrong before. So I tell Brian, that's Michael Madsen. Brian goes, I'm not sure. And so what did we do? I confirmed my hypothesis. I wove through the crowd and I go over and I go, hey, I don't want to do you ugly. And he goes, no, I know you made me, man. And we had a great
Yeah.
talk with Michael
Yeah. He was
Madsen.
super nice
And
guy.
what an incredible Mr. White stuck
Yeah.
in the middle with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
He was in all the
So,
Tarantino films.
oh,
Yeah.
it's in such great film. His role in Species, just
Yeah.
incredible. That persona that he brings across. But the point was that we do that in real life too. So when we go to work for a client, we say this means this, and then we go show them what it means. And then we do the interview and we do the follow-up and we prove it with artifacts and evidence to support it. So Instagram is kind of hard. And
Yeah.
I,
Yeah. I
I
just use
won't
that.
fathom to
Yeah.
but I won't fathom to say it because I don't understand instantaneous social media. But I will understand this. Many times in science, we'll use an exemplar, a
Hmm.
series of events, or make a scenario to show certain things so your brain catches on. It's Where's Waldo? So much of the work that we did in Benning and Bragg and all the other bases that I don't even know the names anymore, where we were a mile away sitting for hours on a situation with role players that were in a complex village, Brian. We were doing that to train the brain. The longer you make sustained observation and test your hypothesis, the better you'll be. We didn't do that as busy work, right? And this feels like busy work. It feels like somebody else trying to categorize human beings, and then based on a score of 5, 3, 5, or 672, you're going to be a lumberjack. And I think that's horseshit. And
Well,
the other thing is
I
people change over time. So
yeah,
do they re-administer these tests? Do they
right.
do them in
Well,
6 months
the
or a
the
year?
the trying to categorize you into some type of job is not. I mean, that's the I again, it's trying to be some sort of prescriptive in nature, but it's not. It doesn't, you could, like you just said, one, people change. You change in the environment, you change who you are,
Yep.
and just because you not a typical person that in that role. I mean, I think about how many different, like, of some of the, so when you get to some of the, like, the top tier military units,
Yep.
like, it takes a lot to get in there, and there's of course people are going to be in generally more aggressive or type A personality, like people like to use, but that's not always true. You get a very diverse group of people, and what I mean by that, different personalities. Some, yeah, are loud and outgoing. Many are
Yep.
very quiet and reserved, and that changes, like you said, over time. Where a lot of people are, I was, when they were younger, were one way, and when they get older, they're kind of a little bit different. Or and I use that as an example because the selection process is lengthy, it's long, it's under observation, it's under extreme circumstances. So the point is to test you in these areas, not to say, not to get some measurement on you. Now they do all of those things as well, right? They have to take
Yep.
personality tests and measure different things, but that's more so for data collection. The really only thing that matters is
Exactly.
did you meet the standard? Did you make the team?
Yes.
And then two, and one of the biggest thing is in a lot of those places, if one person, one instructor for one thing, whatever, for whatever reason, they don't even have to say they're like, no, I don't like them. Meaning they have
Yep.
to also go, is this person a good team member for what we know and think? But that's a nebulous kind of concept because
That's hard,
that changes over time too. You can't put a descriptor on that necessarily.
Brian. If they take those analytics and they measure that data over time against that person's performance, then that person's performance within their team, then that person's performance in combat, that type of stuff, it will tend to show different things.
Yes.
What those different things are, I wouldn't know, and I'm not going to
Not gonna
speculate
opine.
at this
Yeah, yeah.
time. Okay. But I will tell you this, that what that shows, if used properly, can help. Like, for example, if they found out that 5 of their candidates over time failed because of these certain things, maybe they can use that to tighten a loophole. And therefore, that would be a prescriptive, and it
Yeah.
would be a diagnostic, and it would be something that I would endorse. This other way that we're doing it, like Brian, just because you screamed obscenities at somebody when their feet were on the yellow boot prints and threw their gear all over the place and browbeat them and everything else, in no way made that person a better Marine or a worse Marine or anything else. It was a gating mechanism that's been around forever and probably will be around for a good long time. But
Yeah.
you show me the statistics other than people saying, yeah, that really was a determining factor. Remember Mr. Shoeshine that we saw the other day, where his entire military experience was that
Oh
35
gosh.
years after he was in the military, he still spit shines the toes and heels of his boots. But okay, are you proud of that? I mean, thanks for your service, but if that's all you got from that entire experience, I guess
Yeah.
we
You
kind of
missed a lot in
unevenly
there.
rated.
You
Yeah,
missed a
do you
lot
see where
in
I'm going?
there.
So if that's one of many facets that you have, and you're showing that your personal conviction is such that you can maintain it and hold it together, that's great, Brian. But that's not what we're doing. You look, anytime. Why do we call it profiling? Because we create a robust, fidelity-filled profile of a human, and that's different when we're taking a look at personality. Because
Yeah.
personality is sort of one-dimensional or a very few dimensions based on a casual greeting or the outward projection of that personality by that person. And again, anytime you ask somebody to talk about them, you're going to get their result. And that's not real science, man.
No.
It's like, why do we, and this is off topic, but it's on topic. Why do we tell people not to do our resume up in front? Because all they do is a cold reading of a resume. They mispronounce
You,
everything
you,
and it's meaningless.
yeah.
It's
Or and
meaningless.
and and plus you get put into a box. I mean,
Yeah.
you really
Before
do.
you even start speaking.
Before that was the same thing. Like
Come on.
even with some of those, like, military teams and everything. Like I'd show up on
Yeah.
day one for training, and I'm wearing, like, slacks, a button down shirt, and a sport coat. Why? Because everyone else walked in to teach him there was a civilian contractor, wore 511s and a polo
Yep.
shirt, and they
Yeah.
went, "Okay, I'm going to
And a
put you in this
baseball cap.
box." And
Yep.
it's like there's they had to go, "Wait a minute, what is it? This is different." So now you're actually paying attention to what I say and not, reading into a background. That's why we don't do that stuff too, because
Yep.
why would you? And plus, what does it matter if what someone's teaching you has value and it works and there's something behind it? Why do I care what what
Look,
what you did
you're exactly
15
right.
years ago, Greg? You know what I mean?
Look at the test that we did to prove how biases can misdirect you.
Hmm.
Everybody wear a white T-shirt and blue jeans on the
Yep.
range, and 80 role players just performing their behavior first at day, then at night for two different groups, and everybody came back and gave profiles based on what, Brian? Their clothing,
Just nope.
their color of their skin? No,
Nope.
it all came down to their behavior in that environment compared to the other people in that environment based on that specific scenario. And that's scientific, buddy. That goes right to the bank. And I tell you, folks, if you're following us on social media, and we hope you do, share it with other people, because there's somebody out there that's getting it wrong only because they've only been taught one way of doing things,
Hmm.
and it's the cutting the meat off to put it in a pan and then throwing the meat to the dogs, and everybody goes, oh man, that's got to be some historical thing that the dog is our partner in crime and everything. And then the lady at the end of it says, no, that meat wouldn't fit in a pan. It's the only pan I got, so I didn't want to waste the meat. Those type of things abound, Brian, and those urban legends have now stuck around so long that some people believe in science. And when I
Well,
read the
and
stuff that's out there, most of it is that, hey, it's science based or it's evidence based.
I don't.
Kiss my fat
That's
ass.
there's
If it hasn't been tested, it's not scientific.
evidence based is it's a hilarious one to me. That's like it
Yep.
was a non-zero number. That's like that type of
Oh my
phrase for
God,
me.
what a
Like
great comment,
because
by
it's
the way.
like because
Yeah.
it's like
How do you answer Congress? Well,
yeah, I was a non-zero
well,
number. It's
Brian.
like wait,
Okay. What about the use of the term organic? How
I,
many times do we use organic use? Everything that's on the face of the earth is organic. It came from the
yes,
earth. It's
yes.
organic.
I'm like
So why don't you slow
you
your
mean
roll
there's
for a
like I
minute?
understand like organic chemistry and inorganic. Is that what you mean? Like
No,
is it
no,
inorganic object? No, I know exactly what you mean, but anytime I
exactly.
ask someone,
But
it's the
but
same thing. Oh,
so
well,
sometimes we
Greg, it's
leverage words.
it's all natural.
Oh
Like,
my God. Yeah. Well,
what the
you and I both could give it evidence on some unnatural
it's
things.
like
But
what is
yeah,
all
come on,
natural?
come on.
Like, oh man, yeah, the word salad, and that's what you get into this. Plus, you're never gonna
Yeah.
know these things about a person, right? Like when I
Right.
meet you, like if it doesn't help me in some way, go, well, I know if Greg is a introverted whatever this that like
Thanks, asshole.
I can get well
Right.
if it's like if I could see that about you and then it gave me some insight on how to approach this, but this doesn't. It's all junk, meaning it's all just
Yeah.
thrown together. You can't look at someone and determine some of this stuff, and then you
Yep.
can't ask them to determine what their own
So,
personality is because
I'm going to
it's
tell you one. I'm going to tell you one, and cold readers can do it, and they're really
yeah.
good. So I went to a cold reading. I won't name the human. It was tickets for Shelly and I for Shelly's birthday, and we love poking holes, right?
Yeah,
So we go
yeah.
down and we're watching the entire production, and we see everything. And there's a great movie out with Steve Martin. I can't think of the name of it. The soundtrack is amazing. Uh, 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 where he's a small town guy bouncing from town to town, doing religious stuff with all these famous people. Deborah Winger's in it, and the guy that says I have a certain set of skills is the sheriff,
Oh,
whatever that guy is.
Liam Neeson.
Neeson, yeah, he's
Yeah.
90 years old, still flipping people's throats and stuff. And uh, uh, the gosh, I totally lost the train
The
of thought
cold
of the
read place. Yeah, I don't know where
yeah.
you're
So
going
the
with
cold
that.
read. So yeah,
Are
what
you
time
going to
is it?
tie that
And
back
so
in at some
no,
point?
no, and thank you everyone. So we're at the cold read in New Mexico, and we're sitting in this vast auditorium, and I'm watching the people that the guy's doing, and I look, and this one woman is very demonstrative and very emotional and everything, and he goes up, and all of the things that she brought with her are the Ark, Noah's Ark, characters from the Ark, things in twos and everything else. And I'm going, what's the angle? What's the angle? I couldn't get there fast enough. And he goes, oh, I'm going to talk to you about Noah's Ark. These are the people that passed over. And there was a whole bunch of them. I go, okay, hence the Ark, hence the Ark. I got the Ark. What happened within the last couple of years? And it was 9/11. And so I got to 9/11 as soon as he got to 9/11. And he goes, these people were all in the buildings when they hit 9/11 and there, and everybody in that section went down, and each of them were carrying talismans. So
Oh,
what he
yeah.
did is
Was
he did
read
a
the
quick
yeah.
Myers-Briggs based on their method of dress and that they sat together and the type of things that they were saying while they were listening in on them, while the people were sitting down, and whatever they may have written that they were going to come into, what reading do you have? What would you like to do? And Brian, you know what? It felt like it was the real thing. Was it the real thing? No, it was a parlor trick. So
Yeah.
when you see a parlor trick, they're fun. I'll tell you,
And
they're fun to
sometimes they
watch
work.
and read. And every once in a while, they're real accurate. But make sure that you know that the guy that made the quatrains, Nostradamus' first name was Mike, and it'll put everything in perspective for you.
Yeah.
Hey, what did Mike say? Yeah, Mike said a big flood's coming, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Or
yeah, so personality
these
trait
over,
testing,
yeah, it's not good. And then you
it's
just
a panacea now.
yeah, it's an overgeneralization, just like some of those predictions that people make, especially the cold readers who just slowly
So
go in based on your
exactly,
reaction and
how
plus there's only
tall,
so many yeah,
age, was it cancer or a bullet? Right? Am I lying? So listen, next time you go to a doctor, right now you're calling bullshit. So first of all, blow me. Second of all, prove it. So next time you go to the doctor, say, I would like a doctor that bases everything on mere conjecture. So I don't want them to use like heart rate and heartbeats per minute and the results of my blood test. I just want them to kind of look at me and kind of size things up, Brian.
yeah,
And then ask me a couple of questions. Are you feeling generally good? And then come out with the thing and charge me money for it. Come on.
yeah. Well,
I
I
think
think
we've insulted enough people this morning. I feel angry somehow. Why am I
I
so angry this morning?
yeah, I don't know. I don't have the energy in me to be angry this morning.
It's hilarious.
So
Max does. Max is
it's
sapping the energy, babe.
yeah, yeah. And then he just passes out and goes to sleep whenever the hell he wants. So
I'm a lot like Max.
yeah,
Okay. I'm
yeah,
angry sometimes. I'm happy sometimes. And I fall asleep a lot and shit my pants.
yeah.
So right now, Max and I are about on the
You're about
equal,
the same
same
footing
level.
there.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of we sort of we
I don't
we
even remember
talked.
what the
I
topic
don't
was
know.
today.
Yeah, I think we were talking about personality tests.
That's it. I thought it was
We
professional sports teams.
I guess we kind of explained our opinion
I
in
think we did.
some type of manner, explain some of the issues with them, and just how I don't want to use a tool that's unreliable, and
And
because
Brian,
it's not.
if we're wrong, we'll fix our
Yeah,
opinion. But
yeah.
based on all the evidence and the testimony that we've seen,
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
not worried
I'm not
about being
changing.
wrong. Not worried about being wrong on this one. It's
Exactly.
we're not exactly making a bold statement here or prediction with what we're
Right.
talking about here.
Right. We're
So
not really out on a limb or out on thin ice, and that's
yeah,
fun.
yeah. All right. Well, I think that's a good spot to kind of bring it in for a landing on. We do appreciate everyone listening and tuning in, and please share it with your friends. There's more. We have a Patreon side for those new listeners. You can always check that
Yeah.
out. We got the
Hey, the
textbook.
book.
Yeah, the textbook is out now. We should have talked about that earlier in the episode when people were still listening, but
Yeah. It's only two of us now.
but no, we have the textbook out, but all the links for that and episode details and all that stuff. If you follow along at the Arcadia Cognerati website, you get a little discount code. So I would recommend that because it's not
Get them
cheap.
while they're hot, I
But
say.
yeah, so they're going fast actually. But
And they're not cheap.
no,
They're not cheap, but you're not paying for some horrible war story horse
personality
shit.
test.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's just going to be a packet of personality tests that show up in the mail.
And you fill them out and send them back to us with your check. There we go.
So we do,
I'm
yeah.
feeling an
Yeah.
uncle coming through.
Yeah.
Uncle
Was it
Paul.
oh God, you always
Father
remember that
Maciel.
though. So thank
Father
you
Maciel.
everyone for tuning in. We do appreciate it. And don't forget that training changes behavior.